Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Peace and love. I'm Brother Ali. Welcome back to the Travelers Podcast. This is an amazing time. If you follow this podcast, if you follow us, you know that we got a new album coming. By the time you hear this, the album Satisfied Soul, produced entirely by Ant, will be streaming everywhere. So you can go and run those numbers up wherever you get your music. We hope that you love to listen to it as much as we loved making it. I've been making music a long time, and it's one of my favorite projects. One of the great blessings of this album is that we're partnering with a record label. I was on Rhymesayers Entertainment for 20 years, which is, if you're an independent artist in hip hop music, especially in the Midwest, that's the platform you want to be on. That's the team you want. That's who you want to be down with. That's who you want helping you. And we did incredible work together. Like I said, for 20 years, that's where I became me. And I was there for, a lot of the important times for that label. And, 4 years ago, I made the decision to move to Istanbul and to change the way that I do business and to set up my own platform. So me and BK1, who was my first DJ and the guy who introduced me to Rhymesayers, we started Travelers Media. And we've released multiple projects together. And it's been an amazing journey. It's been an amazing ride. We do this podcast together. We do learning series together. We've been doing all our merch together. It's a beautiful thing. But with this project, I thought, man, we need a partner. We need somebody who knows how to do this, somebody who's tapped in, not somebody that we just will, take a check, give them an album and hope they do a good job, but somebody that we can really work with. The album was entirely done. Satisfied Soul was recorded, mixed, mastered. We are B+ already came and shot the photos. We had Brent Rollins working on the art. So if you check out the last few episodes of the podcast, you'll hear about all of that. Amazing, iconic stuff. We knew that we had new classics in the clip, in the chamber, ready to rock. And it's like, man, this album deserves to have some more seasoned professional expertise, just making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And so I reached out to Merce, one of the greatest connectors. So much love for my dear friend Merce. Merce has been extremely helpful in this journey. And I said, man, I think we need a partner. And he said, you should really talk to Mello, head of Mello Music Group. They've released music from some of my favorite underground independent artists, people like Odyssey and Homeboy Sandman and Quelle Chris and Jean Grey and Georgianne Meldrew and, Dudley Perkins. And I always forget people once I start doing this, a whole lot with Apollo Brown. They just released the new album from JB, which is incredible. Crime Apple has a new album. I mean, it's so much amazing music. And so we reached out, me and BK1 reached out to Mello, and we just had the most amazing exchange with him. I told him what we had done. I told him what worked and what hadn't worked. And he said, okay, well, it's important for you to know that I don't have any magic. Like the things that you did, those are the same things I'm going to do. But I have been doing this for a long time, and I'll fight like hell for this album if I feel it. He said, I need to hear the music, but he's like, man, we respect you so much. We're fans of yours. And, he had nothing but good things to say about Rhymesayers. It's not beef. It's not a scandal. It's just that in the progression of things, sometimes we need to move on. And he had artists also that moved on. Odyssey released a lot of music with him, and then Odyssey released some music on his own. So he's like, I understand how that works, So he said, how would you like this to go? What do you want our deal to be? And I told him everything that I would ideally like. And he said, okay, let's do that. And so he drafted a one-page agreement. Normally, music business contracts are pages and pages and pages, if you're lucky to even get a contract, And he sent us one page in just normal, plain language, everyday language. And it was exactly what we talked about and exactly what I had desired. And the whole time he's just been so, open and transparent with us. And it's very refreshing, and it's a really beautiful thing. Also, every time I talk to this guy, every time I talk to Mello, I realize man, this man is so genuinely thoughtful and contemplative and insightful and true. And he just feels authentic and real to me. So this is a conversation with somebody that I'm just getting to know, and very grateful to be doing it and doing it in partnership with releasing music that I care about. And the main thing that I just feel in every interaction is that he loves these artists. He has a genuine care and respect for humanity and for culture and for art itself, but specifically for Black culture and for Black artists. You look at just the level of like Black genius and authenticity and humanity, and you start to get a picture for like, this is how this white man views these Black artists. He views them as fully human, and he clearly admires them, and he clearly has a high opinion of them, which is a beautiful thing. That's something that he and I really share. And BK1, my partner in Travelers Media, shares as well. So it's a great conversation. And I'm very happy to be able to share it. We're brought to you as always by Zakat Foundation, ZAKAT.org. And that's how Muslims give back, but it's in every culture. Everybody agrees that generosity is necessary, even for ourselves. This is a crazy time. And we think like, what can I do about everything that's going on? You can feed a person. You can get an orphan and take care of their expenses for a month for $50. That's an extremely small amount of money to just say, to take a person with no parents and that's food unstable, housing unstable, and just say like, yo, you're good for a month. You don't have to worry about anything for a month. And then we can sign up to like, can I spare $50 a month? It's a really beautiful prospect, And for more than that, you can do even more than that. But Zakat Foundation is like a small independent record label, but in the world of humanitarian work. So go to Zakat Foundation while you listen to this and put something on something, if you would, please and thank you. Enjoy this episode of Travelers Podcast with my man Mello. So, well, I wanted to do this because of the fact that we have this new album coming out with you. And the way that we met, I don't think we met before this, but I mean, you know me well enough now to know that I'm albino. So if I meet people and I don't connect them with I don't realize that I met them before. But did we meet before we started having these conversations?
No, just as a fan.
Okay. So, yeah. But we met like that though?
Yeah, I think at a Club Congress back in the day.
Crazy.
Okay. But it was just me getting something signed. You know what I mean?
So, wow. Okay. So the way that this started was that me and BK1 started Travelers Media after we've been with Rhymesayers, which is like, this amazing organization and team for so long. And we were like, let's try to do it on our own. So we put out a few little pieces of vinyl and stuff, selling 300 copies, and they blew off the shelf. And we were just like, we're amazing at this. And then we did the Love and Service album, and we dumped a lot of money into it, and we got nothing in return. Like, man, we haven't sold through them yet. We didn't get any press. We couldn't get any whatever. I mean, the fans that were locked in supported it, and they liked it and everything like that. And I hit up Merce, and I was like, man, I think I might need a partner on this one. Because we made this full album with Ant. It was completely done, mixed. I think we were in mastering and everything. And I was like, I need someone that I can feel like is really going to be our partner, that can help us with the parts that we don't understand yet. And I'm like, man, I need them to be somebody that I can feel genuinely good with, and that somebody I can trust, and somebody who cares about this the way that we care about it. And he was like, dude, you have to talk to Mello. He's like, you just described Mello. And I'm like, all right, dope. You know what I mean? And I've obviously, Odyssey has been on the show. I've known Odyssey a long time. We love Apollo Brown. JB, we've known for a long time. So dope to see. Like, so many of the artists that you rock with, obviously Homeboy Sandman and Quelle Chris are like two of the greatest artists of our generation. You've done so much dope stuff. And so the way that it was for us was that we reached out to you. I had a very specific idea of like, in an ideal world, this is how it would be. We described that to you. You said, yeah, let's do it just like that. You sent us a 1-page agreement that sounded just like how people talk. I was like, yeah, should we just get started? I was like, yeah, man. You know what I mean? And in these conversations and just kind of in these early times, I'm like, me and Brendan have both like checked in with each other a couple of times. Like, this is a really special guy with an interesting story and an interesting take on things. And so I thought it would be cool that not only are we early in getting to know each other, that we could share this with the people that listen to the podcast.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was talking with my wife this morning about you and how I've been a fan for a decade plus. And you think you know somebody as a fan, and you don't even realize that until you meet them, and you realize I don't know this person. I
Wow.
know my own life through their music.
Uh,
Everything that you did musically that was I thought me knowing you was
uh,
actually my own experiences with your music, or where I was at in life. So it's been really cool to have such a long, extensive understanding of you through the music, and now to start building with you as a person. So that's been really
yeah,
cool.
and a lot of that music was 20 some years ago.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So the essence of the person is probably still the same, but just in terms of my temperament, outlook, and all that. So all that stuff is still in here for sure. But like a lot of those things, hopefully, I've smoothed them out a little bit over the years. Yeah.
Age
So
is good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Somebody said never grow old, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to figure out who said that. Like, why would you say that?
Yeah. I think it just gets better and better so far, and I don't think I'd ever want to go back. Those were tough times, not because of the times, but because just as you work through who you are as a person, that's a challenge. I can only imagine it gets better once you deal with your mortality, which luckily I dealt with that. So
Uh, yeah, I want to get into that for sure. So one thing that only white journalists have ever asked me, and I think it's a question that white people only ask other white people, is how did you get into hip hop? You know what I mean? Because it's from a very like it's definitely not from a black perspective. You know what I mean? Like how hip hop of all things. It's almost like, well, what are we talking about? Like collecting Beanie Babies or something? You know what I mean? Like it's not a fringe. You know what I mean? Like I
yeah.
think for most people that have dedicated their life to this thing, seemed like, oh, that is the world. That's not just some world I want to be part of. But what was your introduction? What was it that made you start identifying with the culture and the music and the movement and all the above?
Well, memory is an interesting thing because I'll remember this differently sometimes, and
Hmm.
have to look at the dates that things came out to figure it out. But the way I've always told it to myself, I remember sitting in my sister's bedroom picking seeds out of her weed, and I'm a little kid, right? And I thought that was cool. I thought she was cool. And she's listening to Ice T's Power Tape, and it's a real
Wow.
tape. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at that back. I'm looking at Darlene like, oh Lord, I'm at that age where that's affecting me.
Oh
Um,
man, I don't think that age
the
ever.
Let's Get Butt Naked song, I'm just like learned every lyric, Power. Like I just learned everything. Those were the first songs I learned all the lyrics for. And that was, I think Goodfellas came out shortly after. And so I was in that era of growing up. My brothers are much older than me. One's almost 20 years older, but like they're of that rock generation. They're of the
Hmm.
Led Zeppelins, and my brothers in music videos, and they're of that. And I wanted to be my own thing. And hip hop immediately, it was like from that I went back to Rhyme Pays, Public Enemy, and I think it was Public Enemy that of course started putting me onto there's deeper layers here. But I was pretty young then, and suburban white kid. And so for me, I think it didn't mean a lot then. It was music, it was rhythms, it was new stories. It just the vibration was right. But growing up pretty middle class, pretty comfortable. Parents are academics. My mom worked at a library. My dad's a professor.
Hmm.
Um, I hadn't been through hardship.
Hmm.
And when I was maybe, I don't know, 12, 13, things got a little rough. We didn't have money as much. And so
Hmm.
I was now not in the same financial position as a family. We were actually dealing with things, living in a community that had money. And then you start to realize that. And I left home when I was 16, moved out to Arizona, and the whole thing out here, hip hop was the thing anyways. So I remember going down like in Tucson. I remember Murs had a shop here, and it was when everybody stood on the corner and ciphered, and everybody rolled blunts. And everybody, Rosie's was a shop there, and we'd get mixtapes and you'd burn stuff, and that was just the culture around me. So that's how I grew up, and it was for me. I think at that time, coming from where I came from, I didn't understand that hip hop wasn't street culture, although
Hmm.
it contained that. And so it took, that led me into reading James Baldwin, led me into Malcolm X autobiography, led me through a lot of understanding myself, and being comfortable with who I was. That took decades, just as a person, but also within hip hop, because
Yeah.
I understood dual consciousness at a young age. I grew up in two houses with divorced parents. Uh, lots of different races in our family, religions. And then coming to hip hop, where I'm reading about dual consciousness with James Baldwin and other people, and recognizing I'm an outsider in a culture that's not of my people to start with, but then realizing this is my culture, it's American, and it's beautiful, and it's everybody's culture if they identify where it came from, and if they just learn their history and their place within it. So that's where I started, but then it's just been a life since then.
Yeah, man. And I mean, you said a lot, like the idea of like identifying what it just seems like people have such a difficult time. And I don't only mean white people, but anybody not black has such a difficult time just acknowledging the things that black people have contributed. Like it just seems so difficult. And to talk about it is such an uncomfortable thing. Like even to just, to just have some sort of acknowledgement. Like, if you talk about the Italians, you know what the Italians have contributed. It's not up for debate. Everybody knows their cuisine. Everybody knows about Rome. Everybody knows about the Catholic Church. Everybody knows about, all of these different historical things, good and bad and whatever you think of, whatever, Mussolini and all this stuff. And for almost every group of people, it's that way, where, everybody's acknowledging that like they have their things that they've done, except for black people globally. It's just like, man, you know what I mean? And to me, I think one of the main ways that the first conversation we had, it just seemed that it was so free and natural and easy for us to talk like that. You know what I mean? And for me, I know that like I had a very unique introduction to that whole conversation, you know, being albino and there's just all this very unique stuff around albinism specifically. But what were some of the early, kind of stepping blocks for you? And nobody ever, I would never trust anybody that thought they had completed that process of like, now I'm just fully human. You know what I mean? Like, actually, those are the people I trust the least, that are like, I'm totally evolved and no longer have a racist bone in my body. And like, oh, your bones aren't racist. It's actually, your way of seeing yourself in the world, which is hard to change completely. And I don't know if you ever completely do. But like, what were some of those kind of early? I'm really interested with you specifically about what some of those early realizations and epiphanies were like for you.
I think reading the autobiography of Malcolm X was a first
Uh,
because it went beyond when I started to realize that the black people in my community had stories I didn't know beyond what
uh-huh.
we saw at school, right? And that their stories were history, just like my history that I had been taught. And that the things that I was learning in school, Egypt and all, Rome, all this stuff, you're right, there was no study of Africa. So even of African Americans, when we were learning about slavery, that's pretty much all they teach you,
That's
right?
where it starts. Yeah. It's
That's
like
where
you
it
started at
starts.
slavery. So everything after that is a step up.
And
They're like,
and
we're
they
not
don't
going to
know
tell you
who they
about.
are. And you
Right.
think that's true until you meet people. And then you don't meet people on a level where you can communicate until you educate yourself a bit. So
Mm,
reading the autobiography of Malcolm X gave me it was a pivotal moment. Lots of other literature too, but that and James Baldwin's book Sonny's Blues humanized people in a way that I could connect to in my own life, in my own, there's characters in my own history that I could relate to and see these are different historical paths within the same community. And I had to, at some point, in your 20s, earlys, you think you figured it all out. But when I was looking at what is American culture that I value, and it was like, okay, architecture, we did skyscrapers, we have movies, media is pretty good. And it came to that thing, like you said, where it's black culture. My
mhm.
God, look at how much they've given us in terms of music, literature, and experience. Look at how they shaped neighborhoods. And that was something new that I had to work through and realize some of my ideas weren't true, some of them were. Still realizing that. And like you said, you never outgrow this because I've lived in America my whole life in the United States. So while I've traveled, I haven't lived long term somewhere else. So I don't even know what my perspectives, how they're skewed. Um, I know that moving from the Midwest where I grew up, Detroit, Columbus, Pittsburgh, to Arizona and the West Coast, Southwest, very, very different. And it, after living here for a long time, it was not just even the black community. It was going to Portland and saying, wow, this is like Tucson if it was all white. Um, and that's a weird
Portland
thing.
is Tucson. It's like white Tucson.
It's a
Oh my
monoculture
lord,
I'm not used
hilarious.
to, and I love
Yes,
Portland. You know what I mean?
of
But I'm
course.
just
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
it's 85% white at least, and sometimes where you're at 100%.
yeah,
And Tucson, I didn't even realize living here that we're 50-50. We're a mixed community. It's not necessarily black, but that multiculturalism. And my wife is Korean from Korea, so I was pretty heavily into the Korean and Asian scene for a while here, and just recognizing that these communities all self isolate and are forced to isolate, and then we all have different levels of comfort with interacting. Um, I think with my wife, one thing I noticed is the Korean community when they're new here, it's super tight knit. I thought that was awesome. It was really fun community to be involved in. But I noticed over time, she was I don't know if she both grew out of it and we weren't allowed in it the same way we were before because now she's with the white guy. And so there was no intentional, nothing like that. But it was just fun to see another community and how people interact. And I imagine white people feel this way because when I'm around an all white group of people, which hadn't happened for a while, just because of how I move. But when I was, it's strange to feel a little awkward just with that moment where you go, oh yeah, I recognize and remember this. They have a level of comfort with themselves that I don't see when people are mixed culturally. And it's not all bad. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But that's an interesting thing to me that I'm still kind of working through and understanding where I'm comfortable. So,
yeah, man. I totally relate in a lot of ways to what you're saying. It's interesting too when you talk about like the level of comfort that white people have when it's all white versus you just include, you just, put somebody in there that's not white and the way that things kind of start to shift. Um, also, white people don't do racial self critique very well from within. You know what I mean? It's something that lives in all other. So I mean, I guarantee within I don't know the Korean community like that, but I would guarantee because of every non-white group of people and community that I've been fortunate to feel a part of, the internal critiques around how should and differences of opinion, and there's like different camps about how do we deal with whiteness, how do we deal with money, how do we deal with how American should we be versus, you know what I mean, or how much should we assimilate, or where should we go for education, or all of these kind of things. It's known that different groups have these internal critiques and these internal debates, whereas like how to be different types of white or different understandings of the race thing specifically is really contentious. Like it really is damaging. Like you see, like that's basically what this Trump thing is in a lot of ways. And the people will say it's not that, but it's really kind of like how do we understand what it is to be white in America in 2025? You know what I'm saying? And in a lot of ways, you see people not able to communicate at all. Whereas, like in the black community, it's like you have some people that maybe would be in the Frederick Douglass camp versus the Du Bois camp, very different opinions. Marcus Garvey camp, you know what I mean? The Malcolm camp, the Martin Luther King camp, very different opinions. Even within nonviolence, you know what I mean? SNCC and CORE, very different. It's like, is nonviolence a forever way of being, or is it just is this just a strategy for right now? People have very different, but the idea that like we're all still from the same community at the end of the day. I see that in Turkey. I see that I like I don't see that I don't feel that specific thing in white communities. It's like if we disagree, then we're actually not the same people anymore. Like it's like a fracturing in the peoplehood.
well, I think that that's very much like you're a white person until they know you're a quarter black, and then you're 100% black.
Uh-huh.
Is how white people view it. Some
Yeah.
white people. Let me rephrase that. So there's a very American idea, a U.S. idea historically, and that's that Obama is black. Now, if he chooses to say that that's him, but the idea that he's a mixed race person with both understandings is there. But I don't think that's when you talk about one political side or one ideology of thinking that way. It's like I don't want to give oxygen to that man, by the way. But I
Of
do
course.
think you're right. Like this community doesn't, I think it's a privilege, it's a
Mm-hmm.
real privilege to never question that because you've
Mm-hmm.
always been politically empowered without knowing it. And just to feel that's something you don't question until you're around other people who haven't had that same privilege.
Right.
And then it's still to this day for me a luxury to be able to retreat into it and to not have to live with that constantly. Um, to know that even in times like now, if I chose to, I can just fade into this. And I obviously don't choose to. That's not where my ideology
You could
is.
just be Bennett. You could just slide back. My name's Bennett. I'm not in it. You
Yeah,
could really just kind of retreat. Like, I'm just gonna wait this one out.
yeah.
It
And
looks stormy out there.
but I think I don't know if this is right, but I think the white community in the United States right now, a lot of them have made big adjustments and have grown over the last 30 years. But a lot are struggling with that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think we're seeing politically is that struggle of lack of interaction, lack of education, and I don't mean formal, I just mean however. And because of that, they really like. So I remember back one thing when you talked about how I got introduced to hip hop. One thing I do remember about hip hop was it was like superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had these cool names.
Mm-hmm.
It was empowering. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
it was entrepreneurial. It was war drums. It was I can do this by
Mm-hmm.
myself if I need to, or with everybody. And I remember my family. And there was that was important. I didn't see that in the white community that I was in. And I think that now that particular group of white people politically like that are having fun feeling empowered, feeling like, oh, I can flex a little and I can be macho
Absolutely.
and they're enjoying that. And I don't think there's
Absolutely.
anything wrong with enjoying that. What's wrong is their ideology and the hate and the way they're building it on top of people instead of building it on their own abilities. Uh, Instead of trying to be mediocre and great, trying to actually be great. And they're just exploring it. And I hope
Yeah.
that it's a phase that they get through. Most of them. Some of them are just pure racists, and that's the way it goes.
Man, that Toni Morrison clip where she says, "What if you take your whiteness away? You still like yourself? You still strong? You still feel big? You still, if you got nobody to be better than, you still feel good." Just like, whoa, that goes to the man. She said a lot with that one, man. That
So
was that.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm struggling. Last night, I'm lying in bed with my son, reading to him. He's 12. He's half Korean, half United States American white, and it's the first time I've had to think to myself. I've always tried to teach him what I believe to teach him, but I had to just mention a little more forward.
Uh-huh.
We have principles, and
Ooh.
the things we talk about or the things we read some Taoism together. These are important right now because in the coming years as a teenager and politically, you're going to have to stand up sometimes. And sometimes you're not going to stand up when you should have, and you'll have to reflect on that.
Hmm.
And I don't know if he's there for it yet mentally, but I wanted to put it out there because I feel like we may be facing times when it's important to know you look back on yourself and the majority of the time you chose right. And when you didn't choose ideologically right for yourself, that you reflected on that and you weren't proud of that and you correct. But it also made me think when I went up to bed by myself, I've never thought of my son's race.
Huh.
It just doesn't, my daughter either. It doesn't dawn on me. I've never thought, are they white? Are they Asian? Are they mixed? I've probably said they're mixed. I know when I went to Hawaii, somebody called them hapas, which is half. And I took offense immediately. Like it was maybe the tone, like all words. It was the tone. I was like, oh, that didn't sound right. Later, everyone's like, oh no, they call them hapas in Hawaii. And I was like, okay, if it's said with love, it's love. But it felt weird. But other than that time, I don't think I've ever thought of what their race is.
Mm.
And now politically, because of where we're at, is the first time I've sat in bed and said, will they have to think about that? And I know Asians are a very, historically been a little bit more fortunate in some ways in the white community and how they're received. although there's plenty of awful history to go with it. But I still realize this is the first time I've had to consider that. And, it's my kids haven't been back to Korea. I'm excited to take them this year just so they can kind of start to identify as they're 10 and 12 with this other culture and this other group of people that they are around a lot here. But it's an interesting time to have that.
Yeah.
And it's a different version of what, like, I remember for me growing up, hip hop and white black relations were I don't want to say hot button, but the zeitgeist of the time.
Yeah.
And then it became, there's LGBTQ, and that movement moved to some of the younger people's forefront
Yeah.
because they kind of had already accepted that this other one was done. And I often wonder what my kids' version of progress will look like and what they'll be
Mm.
fighting for. And I grew up, I remember in the 80s, I guess, they were talking about globalization and one world economy and people working together and science and computers were going to change things. And I look back like, wow, they were right. That changed everything for the world compared to the generation my parents grew up in. And now we talk about AI and those things, but I don't hear the same optimism around it that I heard about globalization and computers when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more scary sci-fi feel to it, a lot more Terminator to it, a lot more questioning of what humanity is. And so I wonder for my son, because they're going to be the generation that defines what is our progressive struggle. Um, and I think that's a natural thing for people at a certain age to do, and that's why we need it. So it's just I still want to tell them about why hip hop's important to me. I still want to tell them about the things that I thought were important, but for them it'll be something different.
Independent artists. I mean, that's the name of the game. I mean, that's what this whole thing is about. We're independent, so we are able to say what's in our hearts. We're able to do things in a way that feels good to us. It's not just about money and fame, which always are great things. You want to get the word out. You want to take care of your family. You want to live a dignified life. If you master something, you feel like you should be able to live on it. And that's important. But what we've discovered over the years is that being independent means that we don't have to censor ourselves based on sponsors and labels and all of this stuff. And maybe less people will know who we are, but the people who do will know the exact version of us that we want to put forward. Exactly what's in our heart is what ends up on the record, on the podcast, on the stage, at the show, all of that. So the fact that we're independent and the fact that you're really part of it, we cannot do what we do if it's not for you. So the fact that you're watching this, listening to it, you've already done so much for us. But I'm going to tell you how to keep this thing going with your support. Best thing to do for any independent situation, I mean, business, artist, creator, whatever it is to get on their mailing list. So for us, you go to brotherali.com, sign the mailing list. I promise I'm not going to bother you. I only send emails when we've got something exciting to share. But that's the best way to stay in touch. Do not think, well, I follow Rhymestairs. I'm not on Rhymestairs anymore. Oh, well, I follow you on social media. Social media doesn't show you my posts most of the time. Can't tell you how many times I announce a tour and people be like, oh man, I can't believe you're not coming to so-and-so. It's like, yo, I came there on the last tour. I was just there a few weeks ago and I talked about it for months on social media. You didn't see it because the algorithm didn't show it to you. So please go sign the mailing list. The other thing to know is that we have a brand new album called Satisfied Soul, me and Ant, 17 new songs, new classics. I mean, this is some of the most amazing music that we've ever made. Grateful to be sharing it with you. You can get that on brotherali.com. You stream it everywhere, but get that vinyl on brotherali.com. We got CDs too. We got cassettes too, all that good stuff. You also see we got a bunch of merchandise there. You can get all of our other classic joints. You can get the Love and Service album and all of them. But this Satisfied Soul album is a special thing. So do that. I'm also on tour. Me and DJ Abilities are going to go on tour in the East Coast and the South and a couple Midwestern shows. The Satisfied Soul tour is the second leg of the tour. Go to brotherali.com and get those tickets. This is special, man. DJ Abilities is no joke. I have never done a tour with a DJ of his caliber. And so I have like goosebumps just thinking about what this thing could be. Don't miss it. Even if you've seen us 100 times, even if you saw some stuff from the first leg of the tour, that experience with Ant on tour, nothing like it. But this DJ Abilities thing is going to be its own thing too. It's going to be, I can imagine it being a very, very unique experience. So don't miss that. Also, we want to let you know, if you don't already know, that this podcast and all the work that we do, we have what's called a caravan, which is like our Patreon for our patrons. But it's a different platform that we use for our purposes. And there's different levels that you can join. You know, $5 a month, you get access to all sorts of exclusive stuff. You get these episodes early. You get early access to everything. There's a $25 level and there's a $100 level. That $100 level is very special. It's really, there's deep, deep engagement there. We really build community there. And the people in the caravan they've been doing that for years now. And people really know each other, support each other, travel together to come to things, you know, to come to shows. Our whole crew of the caravan just came out to the last like 3 or 4 shows of the tour. We have people that come for multiple shows on the tours. We try to gift and offer all the stuff that we do for free, you know, whenever we can. And it's just a very, very beautiful community that's being built there. So if you really want to dig deep, you can get down with the caravan too on whatever level makes sense for you. All of that stuff you can find at brotherali.com. Appreciate you beyond words. Back to this conversation. What's your relationship like with creativity? Because I'll say this because I've known a bunch of people that work in the industry. You are one of the people that sit at the desk that I'm like, this guy has created. This guy is a creative person. Like, you know what it's like for a heart to have to open itself up and to put something out there. And you have a certain level of excitement with those moments, even though they're not necessarily the most, you know, clearly marketable. You relate to things the way that an artist would. And my experience is that you speak our language from a very like creativity first mindset, which is very unique. You know what I mean? So I'm like, man, you have to have some very deep and meaningful relationship with being creative. And I'm just curious if you could share what that is.
So when my parents were divorced, my mom remarried. And so I have 2 dads, really. I was always taught not to call him a stepdad. He's my dad. So since 3, I had 2 dads. And in that house, because I would alternate houses, latchkey kid who alternated houses, it was, there was so much art, like large, huge oil paintings all over. And my stepfather's first wife, before she passed away, was a painter, an oil painter. And that house was just filled. You'd go into the basement and it would just be stacks of oil paintings. And there were sculptures, and they weren't, you know, when most people in the 80s or you know, in that time put art in their house, at least in my community, it was store-bought perfect. You know what I mean? And this was real art. Like, some of the statues weren't that perfect. I didn't think they were good. Why would that be art? And that was my first time being around because they were artists, because this was what we created. And so being around sculpture and that was the first interpretation of art for me. Then my oldest brother, Sam, was, I guess, you know, obviously his mother had died, so he was dealing with trauma at the teenage years. And then, you know, he was probably a fun kid by our standards, by what we know now. But back then it was trouble. They didn't know what to do with him. And he ended up going to New York to live with an uncle and do art school or something like that, because that's what you did with kids like that back then, like art school.
Like, yeah. If you mess up too bad, like, whatever. He's not going to do anything real. Let him go. Let him go paint.
Yeah, we got to figure this out.
Yeah, go paint.
And this is before we knew art was a real thing, acceptable to society. We weren't doctors or lawyers. So I watched from a distance him go up there, and he did photography. I could be wrong on some of this because it's all from a distance as a kid, but I believe he was interning with Matthew Modine before he was an actor doing photography. And then he sold a photograph to Time magazine of O.J. Simpson that was darkened in when they caught him. And there was that controversy. That was his first commercial thing that I know of about the racist implications or other things of darkening O.J. into this. Only, you know, from my perspective, I'm like, that's his style. He's everything he does. Pictures of kids in Ireland, pictures of kids in Columbus, they're all this energy. They looked the same. And then he went out to California. And again, I don't think I talked to him during any of these years. And he did music videos. And his first video he did, and this is, early, before, when music videos were still really important. And, cell phones didn't exist. I don't think the internet was up yet. And so we'd get VHS tapes in the mail of things he'd been working on. And so his first video he did Smells Like Teen Spirit with Nirvana.
Crazy. Your brother did that video.
Yeah, and my other little brother, Josh, is in the front bouncing around. And the story behind the video, it's like there's all these little things, like on the drums it says Samo. And I think that was painted by David Cho, who was an extra they picked up, who, of course, Facebook and all that. And it's just, there's so many. One of the Upper Playground guys was involved, if anyone remembers that place. And so as a kid from a distance, I was like, wow, he's doing everything I want to do. This is so cool. And I'm being told, go to school for this, go to school for this. So this is my introduction to art being pretty cool. And so then I went to school. I wanted to be a writer. And I had a lot of trauma I was unpacking without knowing it when I moved out here. And I worked through some things. I lived through some violence. And I wanted to write. And so I went back to school. I thought I'd maybe be a professor when I was older, do creative writing and work on literary fiction. And that struggle to learn to express yourself, to have what you put down on paper read back to you from other people, and they don't get it. And you're like, well, that's because, and you're explaining it, but you didn't put it on the paper. So how would they get it? That struggle was very, very intuitive to me for art. And when I started the label, there's these, Ann Charters had this book with the 7 elements of fiction. And it was like plot, character, theme, setting, point of view, figurative language. I always leave one out. I can always only get 6. But I brought that to hip hop, to the record label, because that's just my training, right? That's how I did it with writing. And when I was looking at artists, I wanted to make sure, do they have a voice? Is there a plot here? Is there a narrative going on? Is there a climax here? What's the point of view? What's the, and voice, voice is as easy as saying it's diction and grammar, right? And so I would look for those things. And that was important to me in how stories were told through music. And so even now, I say I miss art, because you do have to put on the hat, because I'm here for, my job is to do the things so artists don't have to on the commerce side. And that can get dry. And this year in particular, it's like I've been trying to reduce the scope of everything so that we can spend more time on diving deeper into the art. Because you go through phases where you expand and you overdo it and you realize, wow, I don't have time to enjoy this music, to enjoy this creativity, to think of how to share this in a creative way. I'm just putting stuff out in a formula. And that's not something I want to do. That's not fun. It's not fun for the artist. It doesn't work. So that's why I think, and even me, like as the writing ambitions I have, I remember being young in my 20s and realizing at some point, late 20s probably, you're probably going to be a better writer when you're 60 than when you're 20. Might not have the same energy, but you probably have more to say. And I got real comfortable, because of the record label being exciting, with saying, keep journaling, keep practicing that, which I do. But know that at a certain time, you'll have time to tell stories.
That's amazing.
So,
yeah, man.
We'll see if I do.
It's interesting because, like, maybe you and BK have talked about this, but I mean, he's an amazing DJ, like incredible, and he's an amazing producer, and he can produce all types of things. And just recently, he put out his first project that there's no partners, there's no samples, there's no, collaborators. Like, it literally was just him during the pandemic playing with musical instruments. But he's like classically trained and jazz trained. So he can do everything. He can play everything. He can chart. He can, all that stuff. And he's extremely creative with all of that. But he put this thing together, and he's like, yeah, it's just this little weird collection of beats. I'm just going to put it out myself. And then he sent it to Ant, and Ant hit me up and was like, yo, have you heard this thing your man made? And I'm like, kind of. I'm not really sure what to make of it. He's like, well, I'm going to tell you it's dope. Like, this is ill. Like, this is really creative. I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, the reason you don't know how to listen to it is because it's something brand new. I'm like, oh, word? So I started really encouraging Brandon, man, we need to put this out. And he was like, resisting it. And he said, man, he finally had a point where he acknowledged to himself, I was afraid because this is just my raw voice. And if I put this out into the world to be judged like this, and we both kind of came to the conclusion that there's a big difference between someone who, folks that sit in the industry side of things, that know that feeling of like what it is to try to, because our own hearts, like the experience our heart is having, is the nearest, dearest, most important thing to us, whether we acknowledge it or not. It's just really like, do we acknowledge that or not? But like what my heart is going through is the story of my life. And if I take that and try to explain that to people or try to just create something that's reflective of that, and if I share it with the world, I mean, that's dangerous because people's response to that is their response to everything that's most important to me. And so if people just go, oh, cool, it's just like, what are you talking about? Oh, cool. You know what I mean? Or people are like, you'd rather have somebody be like, I hate this and here's why. And it's like, yeah, all right, dope. Yeah, hate it. And then when people respond to it, it's just the greatest feeling ever. But for folks that have never done that, and there's people that have whole careers being rappers and singers and like pop people and whatever that have never had that. They've never had that experience of like really sharing their heart. You know what I mean? So with
Well, you can tell with new artists, or not new artists, but with artists who are new to the feedback,
aha,
which nowadays we have so much. The first response is always to reply to comments, negative comments, or anything, or bad reviews, or anything back in the day. And just like I learned through writers' workshops, a good teacher making me sit there and not allowed to say anything while people comment and critique my work was so valuable, because it's the same thing with artists. Learn to let people, your art is theirs once you put it out. Let them struggle. Their opinion isn't necessarily right. Maybe it is right. You can learn from it too. And that's, but when it's fresh and from the heart, it's painful to hear people get it, what you think is wrong, but only because now you have to wrestle with it again. And that's the beauty of art, is it bounces back and means different things in different times. So,
wow.
yeah, our slogan here is what sounds beautiful like the truth.
Sounds beautiful like the truth. And I mean, that sounds
And
like an
that's
amalgamate. Like, man, I didn't know that until we started. You know what I mean? And I own Mellow Music Records. Like, I have records with the gold thing on them, and they're like, I have those in my
yeah.
collection in Minneapolis. But man, I never knew. I don't know why that part never registered. And it's like that sounds like it could have been one of my album titles.
Just from the beginning, we talk about soul,
Yes.
and when I was just a fan,
Yeah.
there's this conversation about music and soul, and we call them records. And there was something, you listen to Nina Simone, you listen to certain classic records, and you feel something in a way you don't with pop sensations that maybe make you move, but you can smell the corporate money going on
Yeah.
versus somebody's heart.
Yes.
And that made me realize what I'm doing is really important as a label,
Yeah.
because I am curating and taking care of the best voices that I can that are coming from people's heart. And it's a real record of history. It's a real record of where you were at. And sometimes artists, the Dr. Dre thing, where you just keep making a record forever. I remind artists, it's okay to finish a record and have it be imperfect, because there's a record of time of where you were at. And that's really important. But deeper than that is the vibration, right? Like, there's a difference between hearing Crystal Bowls played in person and on Spotify.
Yes. Yes.
And those vibrations are different.
Right.
Just like a live show is different than recording.
Yes.
But we approximate it as close as we can to the real experience, because if I can't talk to Confucius, I can read his words and they resonate still. There's something in that one-to-one transmission that's not lost when it's recorded. And I want to capture that. That's the sounds beautiful like the truth. And the same thing is true when you lie versus when you let it
Go
flow
ahead,
through.
man. That's right. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
When you recognize you're a vessel and you stop thinking and it's just coming through you, now that's you.
Yes.
That's your God self. So, and that's what I want on record. We don't always get it.
Yeah.
Even when we try our best, even when people think they're being honest, but when you got it.
And then if someone likes it, doesn't like it, responds, doesn't respond, it's just like, that has nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with my ego self. My ego self is the one that's going to want to have something to do with all of it. But like my ego, but my ego wasn't really it. Like if really like my soul is channeled in this thing, my ego had to really take a back seat to it. So maybe I had to just do it every day for 20 years until my ego just got weary. You know what I'm saying? And just got sick of it all. And like a lot of times you got to do whatever you're good at until you're honestly over it. And then you start getting amazing, which is why you look at somebody, you look at some of the greatest of all times, and they look like they might as well be ironing a shirt when they're doing something amazing. Like to them, it's just no big deal. It's deep. So one of my main spiritual teachers says that beauty is the splendor of truth. Like beauty is the outward expression. So truth is from the world of the unseen. Truth is from the realm. One of the names of Allah in Islam is al-haq, the truth, like of God, but beauty is the splendor of truth. So beauty brings truth into the world in a way that can be seen and heard and touched, and that it can be a sensation. And a lot of times it might touch the intellect as well, but it usually skips the intellect, goes straight to the heart. And the heart is what intuits truth. Like the intellect can be tricked into all kind of stuff. It's really the heart that determines, like, do I understand the ring of truth? Like you were talking about the vibration. Like, does this have the ring of truth to me? Does this feel true to me on a heart level? And yeah, man, that's everything.
You don't know you're not hearing
Uh-huh.
it until you do
That's
hear
right.
it.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're just like,
It's never the
oh,
other way around.
yeah,
Like I've been listening to things that are just amazing, and then that's why somebody can come on the scene and change everything,
yeah, 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 yeah,
because we're all hearing something, and then we hear a truth,
yeah,
and everybody gets behind it because it's just, you can't deny it.
yeah. Man, you have championed a lot of people who are the greatest to a small niche of people. You know what I mean? Like I know because I think it might have been, it was either his first tour or one of his first tours. Homeboy Sandman opened for me on the Morning in America tour of 2012, and I'm like, man, this dude is like, that's the way I saw him when he came along. I'm like, oh, this guy changes everything. No one's ever been. It's like this is like if Black Thought allowed himself to be the weirdo that we all know he really is in private. Like this dude is like the kind of weirdo you are when you're just by yourself in a room for too long. You know what I mean? But he's also a genius, and he's also very sensitive, and he's also a little mean, and he's also really funny, and he's also really, you know what I mean? And so like that kind of thing, or like, all of these people over time. What does it mean? And like, I wonder, like, do you feel a sense of, because, like, I know a lot of these people. I think maybe I'm one of them, but, I knew Doom, I knew Sean Price, I knew Idea, and I see how people respond to them once they're gone. But I know that Doom was struggling to be heard. And I know the same thing for Sean Price and the same thing for Idea and the same thing for all of these people. And there's this feeling where you're like, man, I'm so happy that you exist and that you're doing this thing in the world. And I'm also angry on your behalf. And I also like, what does it mean for you to have to be the person to try to fight to get these people recognized and heard? And I don't want to color it too much. Like, what is that thing for you?
So I'll start by saying it's a little more selfish than that in the beginning. And it's selfish in the
Okay.
sense of just plain, I'm enamored with Homeboy Sandman,
Yeah.
for example, and I'm trying to process him as an artist, and I want to be involved and meet this dude because I want to understand this
You
better.
gotta try
And,
to
and I remember
process
meeting
it.
Sandman,
Yeah, because he
and when I met
challenges your
Sandman,
own desire to be
whew,
cool, but you're like, he is cool, but also, like, yeah, man,
man, he can make you mad, and almost instantly you're like, dang, I just learned something about myself.
yeah,
I'm not mad at all. I'm mad at myself. Like, he's a very challenging person in the best ways.
uh-huh.
And that's exactly what I think I liked in the beginning before I knew him. And then when you meet him, man, you got to work with people, and I love the records we did together. He called them like his, it was a real movement for him,
Uh-huh.
like, I hope I'm not sharing too much, but like, so we did Dusty, the first record we did together, and he had a song on there called Put, and he had to make a video for this. And he made one of the most incredible animation videos of all time for this. But by the time we got to where we were putting it out, he had progressed as a person, and that wasn't something he wanted to
It's not
be.
where I'm at,
And the
yo.
song's still fun and lighthearted, but that will never be seen. Maybe it will, but that will never be seen because he had moved somewhere else. And then I watched him as a fan and knowing him go through the next series of records. And what a beautiful thing to see a person continue to develop and not play a role because it will make them a dollar.
Yes, absolutely.
And I agree with you. Like, it's really fun though to champion these people because it's my own exploration of them, and I just want to share that, and they're sharing with me, so that makes it easy. But yeah, I remember the same things you do, like where these artists become. It's strange to see how big they are now. It's strange. I posted the other day about the top 5 indie whatever, and somebody said Doom's not indie, he's major, and I was like, I mean, I guess like that's not how he was then. Like that's not anyone who was there back in the day like knows that's not true. This was the underground. And I wonder, I guess I just don't know what it takes. Like whereas a Stone's Throw has artists that have gone from like being pretty big in underground to pop, right? Mayor Hawthorne, like Aloe Black, like they just continue and I love what they do with that, like to take people to the next level. I haven't been fortunate enough to ride with somebody while they exploded to this whole other level. And to be honest, I'm really happy with what we have done, so I'm not worried about it. But I don't know what the difference is, and I have a feeling that the artists I champion, I want them to have a little more stability, a little more peace, a little monetary. But I think we all need that at every level. So I'm not too worried about it. But I know that that's the idea. I call it the Blue Note thing. Like I can go dig into Blue Note's catalog and know I'm gonna get a picture of a lot of jazz musicians and I'm gonna learn a lot because that record exists.
Mhm.
I want to provide that. I want our catalog to give a cross section of stuff that was not represented anywhere else,
Mhm.
but was the world I lived in. Like this is, when I met Odyssey back in the day, the very first Odyssey was working for Touch of Jazz Studios, producing on some of Jazzy Jazz stuff. Um, and then he was with, I think, Half Tooth. And like, I just met him by like getting beat tapes. They'd send CDs out and buying beats. But I knew that this guy was on the Magnificent from Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah.
And this song was Music Lounge was the song that moved me the most that I kept repeating. So I knew this was great. And that continued to expand. And that's been true with almost everybody I work with. I knew this was great. They had songs that just lived forever with me. So collecting that, championing it was easy because we're making a permanent record, which is why to this day, I don't like disposable crank stuff out.
Yeah.
It's important that you treat your own music, your own art with the respect to share it with slowly,
Yeah.
to think about it, to let people digest it. When I email somebody with a new record, to respect their time and know they've got 40 records, but this is important. Give them a few weeks with it so they can come to it when they're ready for it and have a real conversation. That's and that's what the catalog I hope for the record label will be at the end is 40 years from now people can go and explore parts of our culture that aren't documented anywhere else.
Mhm.
And but anyone who was there will tell you that was it. That was happening. Because I don't go to mainstream concerts. Like nothing against it. I don't. My community has been something else. And so that sometimes you look back at these like the best of the 90s. And it's like, yeah, that's not what we were listening to.
Right.
Anyone I know.
Yeah. Not for me.
Yeah. And I thought I lived in a pretty big cross section of people. Like, so making sure that I'm a part of that is fun. And it is interesting as I get older how I started the label, I think, with ego and ambition. It's Mello Music. I thought my gift was going to be my contribution was my taste, my sound, my experience. And I have had to reach a point now where I realize that's true. I'm always going to be a part of it because I'm here. But now it's more about letting other people have a space for their voice
Wow.
and their experience that's maybe not affected by me as much. And that's been tough because you want to be involved deeply, but you don't have to be. And that's a good thing too.
Some of the most warm and jaded people I've ever met are people in the music industry. And I think that most people come into it because there's something in their heart that feels like, music may make the world make sense to them or might, make them feel a certain way when nothing else in the world can, or like there is some sort of connection to truth and beauty that I think brings most people to the table. And because of the way the industry is, because of the way that human nature, the human condition is, because of the way that our society and capitalism is, because of something along the way, I think people become jaded and like they get their hearts broken. And one of the experiences that Brendan and I have always come back to in our experience with you is that it really feels like your heart is still very present. What have your heartbreaks been like? Do you have a way of, are there protections there that you have? Is there some sort of, regimen that you have to like, what is it meant for your heart to be so present in an industry that doesn't give a damn about anybody's heart at its worst?
So yeah, all of that has happened and been there. But like in the beginning for me, I told myself, listen to more music than anyone else
Uh,
and you'll never feel lost.
uh,
You'll know what's next because you are the ocean. You're in the ocean. So you can't ever feel like you're out of sync or you don't know what's happening and you don't feel insecure. So that's always important. And when I feel like jaded or something's happened to make me feel like I'm not giving my just due or whatever, or something negative, I remind myself, just listen more. Like, remember why you love this and some non attachment to that. Now, it's been hard in the sense of like, I think one of the hardest things is working with an artist for a long period of time
mhm.
and you believe it's family, you believe it's whatever, but you never plan for how to let them move forward or yourself move forward.
Wow.
And so oftentimes that can be dramatic, right? And I've always tried to keep that drama away because these are people I've loved,
Yeah.
I've worked with,
Yeah.
I've championed.
Yeah.
They've done the same for me.
Yeah.
It's really tough sometimes for people we're not married. You know what I mean? Like you work it out with your wife, but with artists and with businesses, we're allowed to let people go explore other paths. But there's no plan for that. And it can be hard to untangle everything. And that can be awkward and difficult and sour. But once it's done, you see what really was. And so you can look back fondly most of the time because almost everything was done in that way. And I think I've had some people early on, Dudley Perkins, right? He was one of the very first person I reached out to. I was trying to work with Georgia and Muldrow, and they were together. And so I was talking to him and we were working. Dudley gave me from the heart so much. Like, I don't think anyone poured so much. I talked to him every day on the phone. I had never met him in person for 2 years.
Wow.
Every contact he had, it was like, hey, there's this intern at Stone's Throw, Steve. He's got some beats. You want some? That's Flying Lotus. You know what I mean? Like, there's all these things that I had no business. I hadn't earned anything. And he was sharing freely with me. And I was doing my best. At the time, I was teaching on the side hourly, making probably $15 an hour, saving up $400, $500 to give him money to do a feature. And he would be like, no, I think you need Daryl Moore on this instead. And, oh, I got a new contact. There's this digital distributor called IOTA out in San Francisco that's really good. Let me introduce you. Nothing in it for him. And he just gave and gave and gave. That was really valuable. And then it's hard later, though, when you can't feel obligated to put out records just because someone's good to you, right? So when the point came where I didn't want to do any more records, that's an awkward moment,
Wow.
right? But I still have so much love for him in that sense, and everything he did, Georgia as well. And at the same time, there's a lot of trauma in there too from different things. But that's true with every single artist I've worked with that I've had a long-term relationship. There's that awkward moments, and I'm trying to learn. I think Quale is a good example. I'm working right now on what's a better way to allow artists to grow. And like, if I'm a little more cold about it or removed, more macroscopic, labels often want to become distributors. Distributors want to become banks, but artists in some way want to become labels without realizing it, I think. What they really maybe want is to exercise some of the control and business processes on their art that they've seen done for so long they know how to do it.
Yeah.
Just like you mentioned, you knew how to do
Yeah.
it. You put out your records.
Yeah.
But I'm scared for this generation right now, what's happening with the DIY push on people being sold like Uber or anything else as like, you'll be independent. You don't need anybody. But there's somebody making money off of you doing
That's
that.
right.
That's not telling you, every single artist I've worked with could absolutely do what I do themselves. But if they do what I do, they don't get to do what they do. So if you don't want to do it with me, that's okay. But you're going to need a team. And that team can be small. It can be 2 guys. It can be 3 people. It can be 100 people, whatever you're comfortable with. It can be self-contained. You can be a solopreneur for a long time. But recognize that you need people and you need trust. And then you got to figure out how to let them go and continue to grow. That's hard, man. It's even now, one of the hardest things for me to let go of now is, and maybe this is why I respect Stone's Throw and Peanut Butter Wolf a little bit too. The shift they made, I remember when people were like, not hip hop anymore. What is this? And yeah, maybe not. But for whatever reason, he went, I don't know him personally like that. He went and created music he wanted and found success doing other things. But for me, I've done hip hop. But I've realized that every time I've tried to step outside of a very specific brand of hip hop, there's a lot of hate. And to me, it didn't make sense because if you've been in a scene, if you've been in a community, you know, not everybody in that scene that is part of your culture and your community is exactly rap and boom bap this, right? There's that R&B cat. There's that, there's those other cats, that jazz musician guy. There's all this. That is the scene.
Yeah.
And so when I try to share that, that's been difficult.
Yeah.
But I've come to the point where it's like the finances, I may not have figured out how to make it make sense yet sometimes, but I got to follow the same path.
Yeah.
Like Black Spade is a good example. Like his album, we just did the live one with the Cosmos, is such man, that's the energy and the type of people I want to be around, right? And so we do it. And I don't know if the person who likes an Apollo Brown track is going to like that. That's okay. It'll be there for you when you're ready for it. But that's a tough thing, is being brave enough to recognize the expanding circle and to take the time and to realize that it took years to develop most artists. It's going to take years to develop those people. But yeah, in terms of just like the industry, I also avoid it. Like I live in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah.
My family, I've got family in Santa Monica. I've got family in New York, Harlem. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. And one of the things for me is, like I always said, if you live in LA or you live in New York, great. But it's hard for me, maybe not for other people. When I am around a lot of stuff that's happening, I want to do it. I want to see it. And I can't help but follow and be influenced. But when I'm here, I can do my own thing. And I find my own connections, and I have to seek it out a little more, which lets it be a little more true to my own voice. I don't feel like I'm missing out. I don't hear somebody that everybody says has happened and this is what's next. I don't see the crowd of people doing it, so feel like I have to if I want to monetize it. I just do where I'm at and figure out a way to share that and make it make sense in a commercial economy. I was going to ask you about that, the balance of art and commerce, because it's like what the Hachikura, right? The Japanese book of the samurai. Like they say, they always view mercantilism as the lowest form because it's always concerned with calculating loss and gain, and that you can't live like that. I appreciate that, but we live in a commercial society. Like the church has to have finances. You as an artist, I'm really curious, like how you balance that.
I mean, what I've always, for a long time, I just had this feeling where, like, as long as I can live and as long as my family have what we need, and if I get to do what I want to do, I don't really care how much there is. You know what I mean? And I was really fortunate to marry a woman who could have been materialistic if she wanted to, but she's just not like that either. And I will say that, like, I think I've erred a lot more on the side of not caring enough, to the point where now I feel irresponsible towards my family. Like a big part of me making the changes that I made and to start taking over more things in my own career was just like, this isn't good for my family. You know what I mean? This isn't good for my body. This isn't good for my. But I mean, I struggle with it too, and I usually do whatever I want, and then whatever money shows up, I just figure out how to live on it. You know, which now I'm like, for this, entering this phase of life, I want to be more responsible, and and I think there's something to be said for balance on either side. But yeah, I mean, it is true that in the spiritual traditions, like, in Islam, the lowest place in this realm is the marketplace. Like to go into a shopping district or a shopping mall or something like that, you're in the lowest, you're in the lowest form of the dunya, of the material world, are those places. And so there's that thing where I'm just like, man, I kind of I don't know, especially in this environment, who would I have to become? There's this thing, we go to West Africa every year. When you were talking about, taking your kids to Korea. So my kids are European and Black and Puerto Rican. My wife is Black and Puerto Rican. So like it's really important. Our kids have been to Europe, our kids have been to Puerto Rico, and our kids have been to West Africa. And in West Africa, the Mandinka, specifically in the Gambia, there's the Gambian Sea, and right around and the Gambian Sea is that one little. It's right in the middle of Senegal. All of Senegal speaks French, but around the Gambian Sea in the Gambia they speak English because the English were better in the water, and so they conquered that part. And so the Mandinka in that area said they tried to fight the English when they first came, and they realized like, oh, these people don't have any like rules in combat. Like they don't have any sense of like personal dignity in the way that they fight. Like they will do anything to win. And so in order to defeat them, like we could defeat them, but we would have to lower ourselves in terms of our own like virtues around combat to beat them. So like in beating them, we would actually become them, which would be the ultimate defeat. And so they said, if we just retreat from the water, let them have the space around the water, then at least we can stay us. And so that's what they did. And that's been my approach in a lot of ways. And it's interesting that one thing I've seen with small businesses that start out really cool, it seems like every small thing that I've seen in America start out really cool and dope, and it's got this like community around it, this cult following around it. If it does grow, well, like once it scales, all the flyness, all the dopeness of it like scales out of it. You know what I mean? Like we talk about, it's the super dope indie band that ends up at Hot Topic selling their merch. It's just like, yeah, that music I guess is still the same, but there's just something that always gets lost in that. And I just was talking to Yasin Bey, and he was like, man, he was just telling me, he's always so encouraging of me, but he's like, you deserve to get paid, and you deserve to da da da. Your family deserve, the money's not for you, it's for your family. I'm like, yes, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. But I'm like, man, show me the example of the person that's doing really well financially that I actually look up to for their money. Like we both know Dave Chappelle, and he's got a lot of money, but that's not why we love him. You know what I mean? Like I didn't love him any less when he walked away from the 20. I loved him the most when he walked away from the 20 million. You know what I mean? We love Muhammad Ali the most when he walked away from the championship. The thing that made me know how true Yasin was is that they kept trying to get him to be a movie star, and he's just like, "This is corny. I don't want to do this." So, like, man, show me the who's the person that I'm going to look up to for their money. I just haven't seen that, and so I, I do believe that there's a way to do it, but I struggle to see what that might be.
I guess this is going to be convoluted how I get there. So I was reading some Francis Bacon stuff
Okay.
and some, I guess, mystic stuff from that time period.
Okay.
And it was very enlightening to read literature from a time point when the spiritual side was assumed
Mhm.
and the material was
Yeah, yeah,
questioned.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yes.
So we come from a standpoint of the material is
Yep.
assumed but is there a spirit?
Right.
And to have that reversed by what European and academic scholars would say is, one of the most brilliant minds, where he's not even questioning the spirit. Of course, we came down from the ethers. Of course, the spirit was this. And as we solidified into hard
Yes.
forms, materialism took
Yes.
over, is groundbreaking for me and liberating to realize at my age now, like all these things I've been pursuing that have never been enough,
Mm.
that have never satisfied me like the moments satisfied
Uh-huh.
me, the
Uh-huh.
experiences. Yep, I don't need them.
Yeah.
And I wasn't successful. I didn't get those things, the material things, when I chased it. I got them when I didn't care about them. And I've been most successful and been able to give people the most when I stopped worrying about that, when I literally didn't care, when I was working nonstop because I loved the work. Like I'd wake up early because I wanted to keep going. I'd stay up late because I wanted to keep going. When you forget about it, it overflowed. But every time I've had to chase something, the joy goes. It's just no fun. And it doesn't work long term.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how people scale and have it work
Yeah.
because, like you said, it's awful right away. It I don't know. It's also part of our world. Like
Yeah.
it's really hard for me to look at a good restaurant and I can't stand every person I talk to, independent, local, now plans from the beginning of how can I open a new one every 3 months. And I think, don't you just want to have one place that you work at? Isn't that enough to be satisfied? Because the people I know who have been very successful, yeah, they don't look happy in the same way. They're not content. Um, the money looks nice though, but
I'm just like, man, yeah. And Yassine said to me one time, if you do something only for money, then the only joy you're going to get out of it is blowing that money. So the money's just going to be gone. Like, you know what I mean? Like that money won't have blessing in it. Like that money won't actually be a blessing to your life because you actually have a hatred for it because it becomes like your new slave master and like you start to hate it. You start to hate that money. And you'd be like, man, the only joy I can get out of this is buying expensive things and he's like, and then sometimes you give it away and then people like look at you like you're so great. And he's extremely generous. But people look at you like, oh my God, you're so generous. And in your heart, you're just like, yeah, but this wasn't even mine to begin with. Like, I'm kind of vomiting this money right now. You know what I mean?
it was I had an enlightening moment when I was down in Costa Rica on the Guanacaste side, and we were driving out into kind of the more remote
Yeah.
area. And we went into a little store to pick up a drink or something, and it's dirt floors, you know what I mean? And guy's sitting on the stool and he's reading Dostoevsky in like Russian or French, right? I forget which one. And he's speaking to somebody in one language and he switches to English for me. And other people came into the store. They're speaking multiple languages. There was a real sense in that area when I was around too of highly educated,
Uh-huh.
very safe and content and happy, and poor.
Hmm.
A combination of things I have never seen in the United States.
Yes. Man,
We
look,
often poverty and violence, poverty
always.
and
Yeah.
uneducated, and to see poverty not equal
Yeah.
uneducated, not equal
Yeah.
unsafe, was enlightening
Yes.
because it showed me there's another way,
Man.
and probably the way that's existed much longer than our way.
Yes.
Um, so it's an interesting one for me. But I do feel, from the label standpoint, there's that pressure. These are your people.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
take care of them, to feed them. Why can't they have this?
Right.
It's my job to make sure they do, and I can't always. It's a very tough thing when the numbers don't add up to what existence requires in where we live.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think one of
so
the main things for all of these artists, like, yeah, I mean, like I just saw Doom at Flognaw, the thing and Sadiq put it together, I think, from Rhymesayers. And I know that Sadiq was good to Doom. I know that Doom really trusted him and he deserved to be trusted by Doom. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, man, I can't say that there's anything insincere about this. I remember because I was on the food tour and I saw Doom, all throughout. And, at that time, I remember Yassine was there for it. Yassine was like, at the time it was happening, he's like, this is the greatest dude ever. And also the guys from Tyler and Earl and like those guys, they always were all about Doom, but they weren't famous at that time. They weren't hot at that time. They were the upcoming, people that everybody was looking at crazy. Like, what the hell are y'all doing? You eat a roach in your video, you curse at your fans, and you throw speakers at your fans. What are you doing? It's just like, what is this? But they love Doom. They genuinely did. But it's like, man, so that was something that, like, watching that thing, I just felt I wasn't sure how to feel about it because, like I said, I can't point to anything insincere about it. But I didn't know like, part of me felt really happy that he was getting his flowers in that way. Um, you know, my wife is from New York, and we met we met on the day that Jay-Z's Black album came out. And so that's always been like part of our relationship or whatever. And whenever I get like aspirational as a rapper, Jay Z really speaks to me. Like, whenever I'm feeling aspirational, that's when I really love his music. If I'm not feeling aspirational, I'm kind of like, eh. But whenever I'm like, man, everybody needs to know my story, then you know what I mean? Hove up. That's when I get into Jay Z. But the movie came out, Fade to Black, and he plays a Biggie verse, and they cut the music out for most of it, and the whole crowd is rapping the verse. And people always criticize Jay-Z for that. And I look over at my wife and she's crying. And I was like, "Why are you crying?" She said, "Because he's showing that Biggie could have sold out Madison Square Garden. He just didn't get a chance to." I'm like, "Damn, yeah, that's real." You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's such this interesting dance. And most artists that are like us, we just know that the people who have been made aware of our music, there's a section of them that they care about it. They care about listening to it the way we care about making it. It's a natural, genuine, authentic reflection of each other. They're crying when they listen. I cry when I made it. I cry when I go back and listen to it. So the fact that you cry, but you tattooed it on yourself. If I had tattoos, I'd tattoo it on me too. You know, but it's just like, man, we just wish that people had the opportunity to know that this option exists. Not that we want to be famous or anything like that. So to me, that's always the pressure that I felt like I was putting on, the PR people, the label, the like whoever is trying to champion this music. Is like, we're working together to just try to make it known that this thing is existing. You know what I mean? I've been talking about BetterHelp, and you hear it so much on podcasts. I learned about it on a podcast. My wife is a therapist. I took my son to a famous therapist, Dr. Resma Menakem, and it was dope. And even after all that, it took me a long time to get into therapy. And I'm starting to realize, like, oh, I haven't been in therapy for like a year now, and it's time to go back. You know what I mean? I keep leaving my friends all these voice messages with me trying to work through stuff. And I mean, shout out to Mally and Chaplain Shane and Merce and, all the people that, and BK1, all, a lot of the people that I talk to on a regular basis, like, you probably know them from this podcast, but man, we need to work stuff out. There's so much stuff going on, and I've been in therapy for a few years now, and I love it so much. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. Whenever I watch TV and movies with my wife and there's therapy in the TV or in the movie, she hates it. And I'm the same way when it comes to the way that music creation looks in movies, when it just looks like one day a song magically appeared, like, it's not how it is. But she always hates to see therapy in movies. But we just showed our 16-year-old daughter Good Will Hunting the other day. And she was like, you know what? Whoever wrote this character, they did an amazing job. You know what I mean? Like, this is actually a great therapist. And man, I just say all that to say that people think they know what therapy is going to be, but you don't. And it's really about finding the right therapist. So for me, I don't have insurance and I don't live in America. So BetterHelp.com is how I legitimately have done therapy for several years. You get to tell them why you're going there, what kind of therapist you want, whether you just want to talk on the phone or if you want to like talk on the screen, and then sometimes in the place you live, there might not be people that specialize in certain things. Like if you live in a smaller city, there might not be the availability with certain types of specialists, and maybe you want to talk about a special thing. Maybe you want to, maybe you come from a certain community and you really want a therapist that understands you in that specific way. So like maybe you're Hmong and you want a Hmong therapist, or maybe you're, Jewish and you want a Jewish therapist, or you're maybe, whatever experience you have, you can tell them like, I want somebody from my community that just understands that. Nothing wrong with that. You really are in control. And if you talk to this person a couple of times, you realize like, I'm sure they're great, but it's just not for me. I've done that several times. You just switch therapists. It's no big deal. You can pause it if you need to. You can let them know like, hey, I can't really afford this right now. And they sometimes will give you a discount based on certain factors in your life. BetterHelp.com is a good way to start accessing therapy or to go back to therapy. It's been really, really very helpful. So I'm grateful to have this relationship with them. So with us, you go to BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/travelers, and then you'll get a discount when you start your therapy. We also get a little commission to help the work here. And I really think it's a win-win for everybody. Check out BetterHelp.com. You deserve to have an opportunity to talk through the stuff with somebody who's an actual trained professional.
There's a thought I have that floats around a lot for a lot of years, and I call it the spirit of the thing.
Okay.
So in the old days, people had tools, and those tools became very intimate to them. And we got rid of that with Ford and mechanization. But the spirit of this thing is, whether you believe it or not, is something that has to be there to run through you. And I feel like when we work, when we do what we do, you have to lose yourself so that the spirit of the thing reveals the work to it. It won't open you up to another level until you are pure, right? Until you've burned off the impurities through work. And you won't be aware of it because you're working. And when you are totally devoted in the right way and aligned to your work, it reveals itself to you and it channels through you. Because of that, that is greatness. And others will see that. But the moment you revel in that, you're not with the spirit of the thing. That's our fate. Right. That's our fate as man, right? Yes, like we are living this existence. We will return.
Yes.
But for now, we get a glimpse of that other moment when we're there. We connect to that other world.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that comes from, what I read, who put that in my head, but I remember that. And I remember it with our work. And I think like when you mentioned you don't know what's wrong or if anything's wrong or insincere with the doom thing, I feel that way with a lot of things I see that are big. And maybe it's the hater in me, right? Maybe it's me being like, I liked him before it was this. But something doesn't resonate sometimes in those moments. And other times it does. And I feel like if you remove the person doing the work, the connection, it doesn't mean much anymore. I hope people get something from it, but I don't know what the purpose of it is. Like I know, like you said, I know Tyler and them loved him, but I don't know if that did something for them good. But I don't know. It's like the Dilla days where for the people who it mattered, it's important. But at some point you start to see some that just don't move you in the same way. And that's a disservice. Yeah. And I don't know why I feel that way, but I do. I just feel like keep your head down, do the work.
I mean, it's the same, it's the same thing on Sundays that there are people saying the name of Jesus that are like really loving and channeling Jesus. And then there's a lot of people saying the name of Jesus, but what they really mean is, Benjamin Franklin and you know what I mean? Like those are the names that their mouth is saying one thing and their heart is saying another thing. You know what I mean? And on Fridays, it's the same thing with Muhammad and it's a trip that like, they say about being in the zone the second you realize, like, a great basketball player say the second you realize you're in the zone, you're out of the zone. You know what I mean? Like just trying to get to a place where you remove ourselves from the thing. I wonder like, what are the biggest misconceptions that people have about what you do specifically? but also about just what it is to be an independent hip hop label. Like, what are the, my guess would be that you have made your peace with whatever people think they think, and you're comfortable doing your thing for your reasons. If you were able to enlighten others to some of the misunderstandings that people have or misconceptions that people have, what would some of those things be?
Label won't make any difference to who you are or what you do. It is literally no different than hiring a PR company or a radio person or a studio engineer. Like, if you think you're going to go get the guy who engineered Jay-Z's record and your record's going to be better, it's not.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Uh,
So if you think working with a label is going to make you any different, it won't. But also the idea that you don't need a label anymore, or that labels are shady, industry rule, they might be. You know what I mean? But artists might be too. People will be. And it's more important that we all kind of identify, what are we doing? And if that connects and resonates for you, that's really important. Like, I like to think of it like basketball. Man, there's no secret formula. Practice. Like, do the work, show up. And so, like, what I do as a record label is like, man, it starts with listening. You've got to listen. And then just do the work, sit with the music, find new avenues. Like, quit thinking of it as marketing and just think of it as exploring the music.
mm,
And one of the problems I see right now is everybody's got the same avenues to promote, and it's social media. and and that's not important. Like, so as a label, the misconception is, one, that we're big, that we have a huge team of all these people that do all these things and we're experts. We're just people, but we have done it before. And it's just putting in the work. And the only difference is we've literally done it. And you know that because we've put out artists and been here. And so we have that experience and we like doing it. So we bring that energy to it. But it's not, and you really should want to work with a label because you want to build a relationship.
yeah.
It's like, it's like dating. Don't go out thinking you're getting married on your first date, but also don't go out thinking you're going to nail them and leave,
Mhm.
because both are rotten. You got to go and just do
Just
it.
be curious
But with the
and be
aim of,
present.
you're trying to build relationships in general. And it might not be marriage, but it might be a best friend, or it might be a good contact that you can get advice from here and there. You don't know until you build it. So labels don't change everything. Um, but I want people to understand, like, having a team of people that you enjoy working with, that you can interact with.
Yeah.
If you can't do what we're doing right now and conversate about something that excites
Yeah.
you, probably not the best fit.
Yeah. No matter
Um,
how fly their office looks or how many bells their name rings or yeah.
it's just not that. And that's the biggest thing. And again, a label should be able to tell you
Mm.
the foundational elements.
The
And it
foundational elements
sounds,
of
being a
uh,
label, it's not sexy, right? And no one gets
uh,
impressed. But when I say you need good photos, you need a good mix, you need physical product, you need time to roll this out, you need to be on DSPs, but also in indie stores, you need to tour, even if it's 5 shows. That doesn't sound sexy, or there's a million articles on that are better. But who's doing it?
yeah.
And, one thing that I joked about the other day is, I look back, there are so many artists that we've worked with who their press photos that we did are being used to this day
Uh,
across
uh,
everything.
uh, uh,
And I love that,
uh.
because that's a useful tool, right? That's a valuable tool. And people don't want to spend $500 on photos or $1,000 on photos. Man, those are going to last forever. But every element, build history in,
Mm,
get a good designer. Like, there's not that many moves that you have to make. But also remember, and I try to tell people this, I sell records.
mhm,
I'm not a brand. I don't want to sell merch. I will on some stuff, but I'm not trying to be like, oh, we got an alcohol company. We got t-shirts. We got this, we got that. Like, I want to sell music.
mm,
And even when we make music videos, that's not the exploration of art I'm necessarily
mm,
into as much as the music itself.
mhm,
That is there to inform and expand my understanding of the music
mhm.
so that I can sell music. And I only use selling music as a metric for am I reaching the people I connect
Right,
with?
right, 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 right.
But
Because the music is the
people
best,
forget that.
like measurable. That's like the one measurable thing is like, is this message actually reaching the people?
And here's how you know how you should think of a
Hmm.
label. I hope I am the biggest fan of the artist they've ever had.
Mm,
And you know how I put my money where my mouth is
mm,
because I not only put money into it,
mm,
how many copies of your record did I buy for what I put into it, right?
mm.
But I also devoted my life and work to that.
Man,
So both those things are what I
yeah,
gave. That's what I'm just treat me like a fan. That's it. Like, if you had a fan who came out and bought $1,000 of records from you because he wanted to give them away in his neighborhood, that would hold a special place in your heart.
yeah, yeah.
And that's what I want to do. And it's not always self-motivated. Like I don't often think, like you said, if you can pay the bills or if you can get close to it, that's enough.
Hmm.
But I really want to be involved with this music.
Hmm.
Like it's important to me. That's why we're working with JB, right? Like it got to the point
Yeah,
where I'm watching what he's
yes,
doing as a
yeah,
person. I've got to be around that.
yeah,
I need to learn how to move like that
yeah,
to carry myself with the importance and
yeah,
the his an indefatigable attitude.
yeah.
Like in what he's doing matters.
Man, it's
I've
interesting
got to be around
seeing
that.
you with JB. There's two guys that I was going to tell you this off there, but I'll tell you on there too. Two people that that are in a similar place as him, that are amazing artists and amazing people, and also, JB's been making music for a long time, and there's something where it's like, I know you're dope. Anyone that's been in a room with you knows you're dope. It takes a minute sometimes to be able to make the album where you could put it on in any room that you don't have to be in the room. Like your album will communicate it without having to say anything. And he made that. You know what I mean? And super dope. But two people that come to mind, my friend Mally. Are you familiar with Mally?
Just watched the podcast with
Oh
him.
man, Mally, the sweetest of it all. I would love to see you guys, but his work and who he is as a community person and as a reminds me a lot of JB. And then Bashir Jones from Cincinnati, man. You know what I mean, man. Bashir Jones also. He just ran for office, an amazing artist and just incredible, like just leader in the community and everything like that. D1 is another one that's like that too. You have these like there are hip hop artists that are still leaders of the people. And like when they get on the mic, it's not just somebody kicking rhymes. Like this is a person who actually is a leader of communities, man. They have those
Yeah.
like echoes of, you know, Chuck D and like what we felt like with so much early hip hop music.
You say on, I think it's on this new record where you say on the corner, like final
Yeah.
call, pushing the records. And man, that brought me back to reading the autobiography of Malcolm. Like that's how we got to treat this music. Like that is our message.
Yeah.
And we're out there pushing that and building with people. I don't know. Your life feels important
Mhm.
when you're doing important things.
Well, one of the things that I noticed with, all the years that I was at Rhymesayers is I would see that the label and, they were very happy for the people that succeeded. Like everybody, like, man, Atmosphere is the identity of that label. You know what I mean? And they were very happy when to the degree that I succeeded, very happy but there's a lot of people that hours and thousands of dollars and blood, sweat, tears, effort was poured into them. And it just never connected in a way that made it sustainable. And I think from an outside perspective, that's one of the things that I know that I feel like the public can't understand, where they'll look at a label like Rhymesayers and like, well, how come those artists you push those artists and you didn't push these other ones? And it's like, man, I know that they spent double the money and poured double the time into that. I know they called in every single favor to try to make it work for this person. You know what I mean? I know they did everything, and I know that if they had their way, those artists would be at least where we are and maybe even further. So I'm just curious to if you could say something about just that phenomenon of
And
not being able.
that is
Yeah.
that is true from so many
Uh,
standpoints. Like it's almost a rule that the more we put into it, probably the less successful they are. because it's this indication that like it's not working. You got to do something. You got to work harder. You want to like, why don't people love this like I
Right,
do?
right.
I've had artists say to me, I just want you to do for my record what you did for Odyssey or what you did for Apollo or what you did for
Oh,
Tolle.
dude, people,
And I was like, oh, let me do less then,
dude.
because those guys handle so much
I remember
themselves.
somebody
Like,
says, "Man, why don't you do for me what you did for Brother Ali?" And he was like, "Oh, you mean nothing?"
right?
He said, "Man, I just got a person to make a. I put him in a room with Ant for long enough, and then I got this guy to paint a good cover because Ali can't see. He didn't know he needed a good record cover. Painted the cover, put it on the front, put the titles on it, put it out. No, oh, you mean no distribution, no video? You mean you want to go on tour for $100 a night and have to split it with Brendan and sleep on Jay Bird's floor? That's what you want? No, you don't want that. Yeah, man.
Yep. That's it. But it's, that's one thing that even with
Uh,
artists, not every artist makes enough money for it to be sustainable. But sadly, the ones that do never know what it's like for the ones that don't, right? They don't know that, like, as a label, when we're taking our cut, that's not just going into my pocket. I'm not just buying pinky rings. That's going to make these other records that I know might not make money. And my goal is generally, as long as it can break even, great, because then we can keep doing it. But a lot of that profit goes into other records. And I love it. That's why as a label, I don't feel ever guilty about making money off of a record, because I know it's going to go right back into another artist's pocket to make something else. But yeah, it's crazy. And sometimes it's just I get overzealous with stuff that I love. So you just
Man, you said that
keep
the
pouring
artists
into
who
it.
don't make a living don't really understand why, but then the ones who do make a living don't know what it's like for the ones that don't. Man.
Because it reaches a certain
Yeah.
point where, and this is something I'm adjusting to now. Let's say me and you started at the beginning together and you sold 500 copies and we get $2,500 and we spent 10,000. So cool. We're going to keep going and do another one. And then you sell 2,000 copies. And it still takes, even when it's successful, 5-10 years. But let's say we get to that point where it's really popping. Maybe you're generating $250,000 a year, but half of that's expenses. So you're actually only making 60 grand a year. And the label's taking 60. And you start to think, dang, everyone around me is making, I'm stable enough in life to be around professionals, to have friends that have jobs that make $60,000 to $200,000. I'm successful. I need that too. Do I need to keep putting records out and giving half or giving 30% or giving, whatever to a label? I could just do this myself and take a bigger share without realizing that they probably could, but maybe not. You never know. But it's tough to explain or to want. For me, I've never had that option to be like, oh, I don't need that much. I'm using that to finance other people I think will be good too, because that's their money in their mind. And in many ways, it really is. But I'm learning through experience with artists. There may be a point when I need to start saying, you're a proven entity. We take less and less every year.
When there's, yeah, oh man, yeah.
The risk has reduced.
And I have to say
And
that,
I just,
yeah.
but you get used to the relationship. So you think that's what you have to
Yeah.
do. But then you lose people and you go, I don't blame them, but I need that much to be able to run my business.
Right.
And then you go, now I'm starting to go, or maybe before it gets to that point, you say, let's change these splits. Let's do this because the risk factor is gone and you do need more to continue to advance in your life.
Man, this, I mean, this is like a therapy session for me. You know what I mean? Because I was with Rhyme
I'm
Sayers.
just talking
I
through
know,
ideas.
I know that. I
like,
know, and that's why it's hitting me. That's why it's striking me as like we said, the ring of truth. It's like, oh, this is true. Man, you're saying things that are really necessary for me to hear on so many levels. Like one of the things that
you don't realize it until it's too late. You know what I mean? There's no reason for me to think to reconsider how deals are done when it's working and that's the only way we know until you lose something.
Look, yeah. Absolutely. And I love what you said about like there's not a plan for how do we move on, graciously and gracefully. You know what I mean? Like if this isn't going to necessarily be a forever thing, is there a way for us to, to grow into a direction where we can, there's just not a, we don't know a roadmap for that.
I'll get deeper on that. There's also no plan between artists and labels for what happens when the artist falls off, but then comes back because he's been supported. What happens when a label falls off but comes back? We don't build into our plans life, which goes up and down, ebbs and flows. I'm not always going to be, Mello Music Group won't always be year after year better than the next monetarily.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Maybe monetarily sometimes, but not even work ethic wise. We have to allow to have off periods in these relationships, but we don't. Just like corporations, we follow their lead of quarterly, you got to put results up. You got to build into that. If I'm going to have a 10-year relationship with you, or a 20-year relationship, or a 30-year relationship, I got to know there's going to be periods that are up and down for both of us. And we have to allow for that and build it into our plan, which usually, like most relationships, means trusting people to go out and back and do different things, and figure out how that can work. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's like, you refer to it like with almost like romantic relationships and marriages and things like that. And, I've been an imam and a chaplain and stuff. And it's one of the things that, like, counseling people on relationships, it's like, okay, so a year is 365 days long. You can have a good year where really only 3 months of the year were actually good, and it can still feel like your best year. And you just really had one, like, really just, it was a great summer. Like the rest of the year was either mediocre, or like some of it actually was really bad. So it's like, okay, if your marriage, how long do you want your marriage to be? You know what I mean? We're going to be married 50 years. Okay. So 20 of them might be just really bad years. Like you might have a lot of bad years together. You can have years where this person is off, and you can have years where this person is off, and then you can have years where, you're doing great, but you're not connecting and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, man.
And growth comes through challenge. So if we break everything off when there's challenge, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's the same with marriage, and allowing people to grow is hard.
Man, you have to become
because you want them to be who you are.
Yes.
But
it's like, well, I signed
not.
up for this. I'm like, cool, so did I. But I'm not that person anymore, and neither are you. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, man, when I met my wife, man, she was just a cute chick that worked at Victoria's Secret, and you know what I mean? And then, like, she suddenly broke all the molds in her family, and now she's a, private practice therapist with all these degrees and all this kind of stuff. I had to become a different dude to stay married to this woman. I can't be the same guy that I have to be a different husband, at least the way I show up as a husband. I can't be the same husband I was when I met her. Otherwise, she's going to have a different husband.
So I wrote my wedding vows for my wife and I. And she's from Korea. English is a second language. So we joke
so
now.
You're like, you must obey me.
So one of the things in there, I was in a very,
he's just saying that you have to.
Mind you, Dudley Perkins married us.
Amazing.
Like he oversaw it in his alligator Nike Dunks, and
amazing,
Koofy and everything.
Amazing.
But like, the funny thing is like, we joke because there's one part in it where I talk about, most people say death do us part, and I didn't have that. It was our souls continue and find each other again, sort of thing. And she jokes like, oh, wait a minute, I committed to the soul thing too? I don't think she got that back then. But I do say, even now, I feel like when you aim to do well for a year, around 6 months, it starts getting hard. When you aim to make it last 20 years, around 15 years, maybe it gets hard. By aiming to have relationships be about the soul that will recognize each other later, it makes this lifetime seem short. And that's true with music. That's true with my marriage. I don't think it's hard to have, if you don't expect to have 5 bad years, you're not thinking long enough.
Man, you speak so poetically, brother. Is this, like, in even your way of articulating yourself, do you think that, like, is this from like a regular writing practice? Or do you think you write because is this just how you think? Is like, are your thoughts always this organized?
Probably my mother. being a librarian and you know, my stepfather, like just being around. Like I remember going to see the movie Gandhi very young, but we'd have to have conversations afterwards and explain what we took from it. Like they took me when I was young, real young, to see Platoon, but you
Oh
get out of that
man.
and it's like in my house, it was let's all sit down, we're going to talk, express yourself.
Right.
And if you ever come with some, oh man, when he hit that guy, that shit exploded everywhere, you're going to have to work through that
Right.
to
What is it that
understand
makes you like seeing somebody get hurt like that?
why was,
Let's unpack that.
yeah.
Like, damn, I don't want to unpack it.
So I give credit to my mom and other people around me, but then also, you know, I'm around amazing artists who speak eloquently. And so whatever I get is from those people. But yeah,
Well, there's no way to encompass all this in one conversation. And like I literally came into this like, just really exploring, just wanting to understand you better and just wanting to know more. You know what I mean? And me and Brendan talk about this regularly. Like, it's funny, it's interesting that you say that like, the biggest misconception is that a record label can do something for you. Our first conversation, I spelled out all the things that we had done that we felt like went wrong on the Love and Service album. And you were like, I'm not going to do anything different than that. So let's just start with that. Like, I'm doing everything you just said. I'm doing exactly those things. So the only difference is that we'll be doing it together. Like I'll be your partner and we'll try together and we'll succeed together or we'll fail together or we'll land somewhere in the middle together. The only thing is I'll just be there and my team will just be there. That'll be the only
I
difference.
think I said to you, if I didn't say it to you, I say it to other people. Give me the Kendrick record, right? And it flops hard
Mm.
because I don't have the infrastructure. I don't have the mechanics that he has yet. Like you just are at the level you're at and you will constantly add another layer to it and just keep doing that. And so like when you presented what you did, I'm like, yeah, that's how you do a record. So I don't know. Let's do that again. But let's see if we have different contexts. Let's see if we connect with more people. And let's see if having more people on board to put the hours in and to message people works. Because it is a fractured social media scene. And I miss when I started, I had to work hard to get somebody's physical address.
Mm.
So I could mail them a CD before the album came out so they could listen to it and consider if they wanted to review it or put it in Hip Hop DX.
Right.
But that required me to make a connection and a physical presence with people. And now the equivalent is probably like just taking time to actually email people and have a short conversation, or get on the phone and explain a record or why you're doing something. But man, that's the difference.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's like if you can get 50 or 100 people on board that actually know you and talk, they spread it too. And that makes the difference. But yeah, it's no secrets. So,
Yeah, man. Well, like I said, there's never one conversation can really encompass it all. But I wonder, and I suspect that maybe you might be able to do this. But if I know now what the theme and the motto and the kind of mission statement of the label is. But what is it that you would like to leave behind with this being such a big part of your life's work?
heavy. I've had a lot of people recently ask me my exit plan, which I thought, oh, am I supposed to have one of those? The selfish side of me again, which creeps in, is I hope I leave something for my children that they know me better when I'm gone through exploring it. And then the non-selfish side is I hope that all the people I've worked with, not just artists, but people within other areas too, that they go on to be more successful than me. I've always learned from my teachers that if the student doesn't pass the teacher, you didn't do it right. So I really hope that in 20 years from now, there's a bunch of other successful labels, bigger people, all bigger that dwarf us, that we had contact with and influence. And I hope that happens. Because already I feel like it's too late in the game to be anything else. So this is it. and I'm really okay with that. This is great. So, yeah.
Well, man, thank you for this. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's been a pleasure kicking it with you, man. And hopefully it's just one of many more to come.
Yeah, it's fun to have a conversation with you just as a person, and then step back for a second here and go, "Oh, this is a podcast."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because it's not at this moment. It's just me and you talking,
Right.
and that's kind of cool to know that this gets to be shared. So,
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, Brendan tells me all the time, he's like, man, this is one of the rare occasions when you would ever say to somebody, you're missing out by not being in on these like regular conversations. Because most of the time it's just like, well, what variants are we going to do? And how do we get him? How can we make sure that he gets to sign these Obi strips before the da da da? And we're like, what if we do this and the timing of that and all this, most of that stuff can be really tedious. He's like, man, every conversation I have with Mello is like, man, I would hang out with this dude. Like, it's a good opportunity just to, you know what I mean, to talk. He's like, man, something really thoughtful and beautiful and poetic comes out of every one of these conversations, even if it's a normally tedious, uh, you know, check in about some business thing or some logistical thing. He's like, man, this guy is genuinely, he's like, I wish, what he was telling me is he wishes that I could hear those conversations. He's like, I know you can't, like, just time wise, just cannot be in on all these calls. But he's like, I wish you could, just because like this dude is amazing. You know what I mean? So that,
it's funny. I call Brendan for the same reason. Like I called him before we got on this, just to like quick check in before I do this podcast,
uh,
just because I needed his energy and some of like his conversation about things, because it's the same way.
man, yeah, he's the best, man.
Enlightened person.
Yeah, and you guys have so much in common in terms of like the approach, but also you express it in different ways, and yeah, it's really beautiful, man. It's like it's really, really, really an incredible thing, man. I appreciate you,
Well,
brother.
enjoy your
Thank you
night.
so much for
Yeah,
this,
you
man.
too.
Special thanks to Mike, to Mello for being so just generous with his time and his insights and his thoughts. And, he said a lot of things. There's a lot of moments that I've been thinking about ever since this conversation, and so many of the things that he said resonated with me. And it's really good as a person, like I said, I was on a record label for 20 years and there was a lot of highs, but there was frustration too. And so, being able to deal with another label now, um, I'm in a very different position, but it's really it's really opened my eyes a lot. You know, it's kind of like you don't know your language until you learn another language. I thought I knew a lot about America, and I do know a lot about America. But once I moved to Istanbul, like you see it from a whole other light. You start realizing things that maybe I didn't appreciate as much as I should have. You start realizing some of the gripes and concerns I had were also valid. So it's just a very, very beautiful thing to be able to speak with somebody who's so open and thoughtful and considerate with the way that he communicates. So shout out to Mello. Go and run up the numbers and get the album, to support these people. You heard now from B Plus, who shot the photos. You heard from Brent Rollins, who designed the packaging and the the physical environment for this album to live. You can go back and check out the episode with Joe Mabbitt. You've heard multiple episodes with me and Ant. You heard BK1. You know what I'm saying? There's episodes with him. All of the people that are involved in this thing, it really is like it's like a group, a coalition, a team of people that really care about you and communicating with you. And of course, you are the necessary part of this as well. So we're very, very grateful to you. Go to Zakat Foundation, zakat.org. Put something on something. They've been supporting this podcast from day one. They keep it free. They keep it accessible for the people. They keep us going. And also go to betterhelp.com. Get down with some therapy. I'm grateful. I feel like I'm able to have great experiences together with great people, and to be able to share that stuff with you. It's a tremendous honor. I love you. I love everybody that I just met. I love everybody I've had on this podcast. And what can you say? Life's good. Love you all. See you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.